year is 1974. If you're a dairy farmer, you're dead. Prices are up like 30%. The government steps in, prices drop, and now you can't feed your family. And the only guy who wants to help you is this hot, young upstart called Jimmy Carter. You've just been Watergated, so when he says he's going to raise the price of milk 8 cents a gallon, which is like a billionfold in those days, you don't believe him. You vote for him anyway. And the thing you didn't count on is that this is actually Jimmy Mr. Beast Carter, because he doesn't play about his money. So he gets into office and he pours $2 billion over the next 4 years into dairy production. And then Congress, not wanting to be outdone by the greatest showman of all time, promises to raise the price floor of dairy not just once, but repeatedly every single year. Now, when you decide to raise the price floor of something, you have two options. You can either fuck around with supply, and we had done that before in the 1940s by telling farmers to make a little less so that every unit was worth more. But it's the 70s, baby. Socialism's over. You fucking lost. Get over it. So we're doing demand side stuff now. We got to make everything wanted more. And you can either do this by planning once inside of a consumer head, but that's like so evil. And like, America's not going to do that. What we can do instead is step in and be the backup super consumer ourselves. Jimmy Carter puts out a call saying, "Bring me your poor, your hungry, your needy. I will buy your cheese." Dairy farmers end up liking this program like a lot. Like a lot. They start producing so much cheese. And just during the Carter years, we're buying 500 million pounds of cheese. We're having to find air-conditioned warehouses in 35 states to store all of this. We got cheese flowing out of our ears. People in the government start asking, oh my God, I just want to dig a hole and throw this cheese away. And then someone says, why dig a hole if I got my own hole right here? Limestone caves, naturally occurring, perfectly spacious, kept at 36 degrees Fahrenheit, perfect for all your cheese storing needs. Plus, I have secret passages into the mountains, so no one's gonna find out about your cheese venture. The media instantly found out about the cheese, and then people start making jokes. Big guy making fun of the government. It's not funny. It's not funny that the government bought too much cheese, and now they have to rent out an entire cave system in Missouri just to store their cheese. It's not funny that the bureaucracy of the government is so bloated that we're sending professional cheese inspectors on the road for 10 plus months so that they can take core samples of cheddar cheese to make sure that it's grade A according to government standards. It's a government program gone terribly wrong. It's emblematic of all of the waste that the government is constantly responsible for. Carter's fucked it up. Plus, he let a bunch of hostages get taken, and gas prices are super high. And wait, it's morning in America. Ronald Reagan is here to save the day. He's gonna make the government small again. He's gonna put money right in your pockets. Oh my God, in his first 100 days, he's doing it. He's doing it. And then Agricultural Secretary John R. Block runs up the steps of the White House and holds up a moldy block of cheese and says, the government has 600 million pounds of this molding and rotting in facilities all around America. God damn it. Oh, if you're Reagan, you're in a bad situation. Reagan's sitting there like, I'm a small government guy, and now I have this government program that's gone terribly wrong. And on the one hand, it's making corporations a lot of money. This is the American economy that we're talking about. But on the other hand, all the waste. And I can't sell the cheese because then I'm competing with the exact people I'm trying to help, and I can't give away the cheese because I've spent this entire campaign complaining about welfare queens. People like the military, right? People like schools. I'll give it to military kitchens. I'll give it to schools. It doesn't make a dent. Oh. I'm gonna have to do some socialism. Fuck. Give it to the Native Americans. Give it to the housing projects. Give it to the elderly. Just do it fast.
Listen, did I see a block of You seen it.
Hood cheese.
Yeah, government cheese.
Where's a knife?
That's government cheese. You need a hacksaw.
Where do you buy government cheese?
You don't buy it.
You have to be on.
You got to be on their special mailing list.
And it looks like curtains for our buddy Reagan. He's just gone against everything he stands for. But hold on a second. Lest we forget that yes, the cheese is good. It's grade A government cheddar, as we were saying. However, it's been sitting in storage facilities, not all of which are the same cheese cave quality, and it's gotten moldy, it's gotten dry, it has a sheen around it. Plus, while only 22% of white Americans are lactose intolerant, that number goes up to over 75% depending on the minority group. The majority of minorities are lactose intolerant, so we were counting Reagan out. We counted Reagan out, but here he was this whole time making minorities shit themselves. Still, it is free food. It's cheese, it's dehydrated milk, it's butter, it's other good quality dairy products, and a lot of people do have a certain fondness for this. It's help given to them at a time when they weren't doing too well. And you'll still see that a lot of very popular and successful chains will have government-style cheese in their recipes.
Beloved by El Pasoans like no other is the revered Chico's Tacos. Ground beef rolled inside of a corn tortilla, deep fried, placed in a paper nacho boat, topped with the house's special tomato sauce, and then smothered with something I can only describe as good old-fashioned government cheese.
There's also a way of seeing this, that it's a shitty, unwanted handout from a government that hates you, and a marker of a social status that you're one to throw off.
You're gonna end up eating a steady diet of government cheese and living in a van down by the river.
No. Have you ever had government cheese? Craig, government cheese, you had some? No. Thick, stinking government cheese. Couldn't take a dump for 2 weeks.
You're going to see a lot of references to government cheese in rap songs, notably from Chief Keef and Kendrick Lamar. By 1985, Reagan is so done with this shit, and he leans over to his advisors and he says, "How do I get out of this?" And they say, "Sir, you're not going to like it. It's more socialism." So Reagan initiates the dairy termination program, which isn't as bad as it sounds. He just pays farmers to kill their cows, then go into voluntary exile from dairy for 5 years. There's also more moderate programs where he's just paying farmers not to produce milk anymore, like that fucking socialist FDR did. But now the government's done this, and they've done this until they're out of cheese, and third world Maoist Reagan is free. You see, tanky Reagan did a cultural revolution for dairy farmers. He took a great leap forward into the plains of Iowa. And after this, there's a lull in government support for dairy. Understandably, right? You start getting a lot of these acts and laws passed that we're very familiar with now, which are branded as patriotic somehow, but it's just the government saying we're not going to help you anymore. They call it the Freedom to Farm Act when they eliminate the price floor that the government imposed on dairy. So you go, you're free to farm. We're not going to help you anymore. You're free to do your farming bullshit, whatever it is that you do. I mean, who gives a fuck, right? By the mid-90s, the government's divested completely into cheese caves. They've sold all of the rented space as well as the cheese to cheese companies. Classic neoliberal move. The government decides we are never ever doing this super buyer bullshit ever again. Let's pull the secret third lever. Guys, it's okay that we spent time feeling sorry for Reagan and for Jimmy Carter because they are not the villains of this story. What happens next is that the Clinton administration founds the Dairy Management Incorporated as an advertising firm for dairy, funded by dairy farmers via the checkoff program, and begins the PSYOP era of dairy history. At this point in time, people don't really want dairy. They've started paying attention to their lactose intolerance and being like, oh, I keep fucking shitting myself every time I eat this. I should probably stop eating this. Plus, there's a lot of new health studies coming out showing that dairy is not really that good for you? And the part of the government that isn't the dairy lobby is starting to push that news forward. The DMI is still enlisted as the dairy spokesman, and now they have an uphill battle to play. So what's their first move out of the gate? Boom, got milk. You know what? Fuck it. Dairy is a food group. Fuck nutritionists. Put that shit on a poster right next to Britney Spears. You know what? Fuck the farmers, because they're mad about us buying a bunch of Britney Spears posters and accidentally airbrushing her belly button off. So we have to recall every single Britney Spears poster that we put in schools right before summer break started. And no, I don't give a shit if the farmers are funding us with a mandatory tax on all of their dairy products that many states are currently fighting against. I got people in the White House who got my fucking back. Tell Vilsack to put more low-fat cheese on that goddamn school pizza. They're gonna drink that shit with some low-fat milk at 9 in the morning. I'm upfront about my bias here. I don't like the DMI. And maybe part of it is because every single program that they sponsor ends up being pretty fucking shitty. Like their methane capture program that ends up releasing more CO2 than just letting the cows hang out. The MILK program that demands farmers don't do best practices for their safety, like trimming their cows' tails. And then you start getting farmers who are going blind because the cows will fling manure into their eyes. I love what these guys conspire to do is inventing a new fast food item that's like ridiculously cheesy. They're the guys behind Domino's stuffed crust pizza. They're the guys behind the double steak quesadilla at Taco Bell. They're the guys behind the mozzarella sticks at McDonald's. Oh, you didn't think I was going to go there? You didn't think I was going to bring that up? Of course I'm going to bring up the McDonald's mozzarella sticks. That shit was made with starch, so it's 90% water weight in the first place. And you break it open, and there's no cheese in there anyway. These guys move no product. And then the part of their job that's just making us want to go out and buy more cheesy things makes them look genuinely bad at their jobs. I mean, one look at their social media presence and it's all sappy and trying so hard that seems genuinely out of touch. If I'm being generous, I could say that maybe this stuff is designed to appeal to their farmer base. I don't think I'm being too hard on the DMI with this, because a lot of their stuff is about deliberately pivoting to target Gen Z.
We heard a lot about Gen Z in many presentations. We had some really strong speakers come in and talk about the importance of Gen Z.
This is a generation who was raised digitally, digital natives. They're purchasing with their values.
They're talking about how we're doing things differently now, that we're making dairy more environmentally friendly. But it's obvious greenwashing. They're saying shit like cow diets are 75% inedible to human beings. Well, sure, what about the water needed to grow that stuff? It's a lot of water. And I don't know, man. At this point, I start to feel a little bad for the DMI because they're such an underdog here. It seems like they have no chance. I mean, they're just like a government industry with unlimited money and unlimited access because they don't have to follow the same rules that other advertising agencies have to do. They don't have to disclose when something's an ad, so they can pay someone to do something and then make it look like an organic thing. They are de facto government sanctioned propaganda, but they don't have the Chinese state affiliated media stamp on it. No, it's more like in Fast and Furious, how the Pentagon screenwriters worked on that movie, because that's part of the contract. Whenever you use any US military surplus equipment in your movie, the Pentagon screenwriters get to go in and change that movie. That's a true fact. That's a true fact. It's on the screen. It's a true fact. But imagine that for cheese, right? Because here's a fun fact. Sean Evans' Hot Ones, that glass of milk conspicuously on the table, that's the DMI. The DMI put that glass of milk on the table. What the fuck? The butterboard trend that was on TikTok last year? DMI. The DMI did that. One more. Mr. fucking Beast. Mr. Beast is taking Big Cheese's money. Jimmy Beast is taking money from Big Cheese. Look at this Minecraft Let's Play cheese making challenge. What the fuck are you guys doing? What the fuck are you guys doing? We're getting psyoped for cheese, and for what reason? There's no conclusive evidence that this is even making cheese sales go up. If you look from quarter to quarter, after they government propaganded us about fucking butter boards, the butter data didn't increase. The sales data for butter stayed exactly the same as where it was before. No one bought more butter. Why are they allowed to do this? And the whole thing is baffling. Most baffling of all to me is that they partially own Hot Ones, but they have their own rip-off series of Hot Ones. Marker?
I'm gonna ask you a question. When you answer, you eat the wing. We have hot, hotter, and holy cow, that is hot.
What is this? What are they doing? They have unlimited access to lie to us. They're hiring food chemists and child psychologists, and they're paying the Mayo Clinic to discover facts about the health benefits of dairy. Meaning, bury the other stuff, lie to us about fringe benefits, and have a reputable name attached to it. We can't trust fucking anyone. And it's about cheese. Why? Why? I like cheesy crust pizza. I like double cheese. What? Why did they get psyoped into liking it? The DMI fucking bailed out Domino's Pizza. Domino's was gonna go bankrupt, and they said, we can't have such a good American cheese producer go out of business. What? Did we need to bail out Domino's? This is fucking bullshit, dude. This is fucking bullshit. And the recent spike in cottage cheese and Greek yogurt, don't think that was organic. Do not think that was organic. The DMI had a hand in that. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, it seemed organic. Oh my god, it seemed organic, right? It seemed organic. Dude, people talking about TikTok, they're taking the money. They're grabbing the bag and running, and they're not thinking about you. They're not thinking about what that's doing to your brain. You are so susceptible to propaganda. You are not beyond propaganda. When's the last time you thought about a dairy product, huh? It was probably recently. You might have bought one recently. Oh, you fucking sheep. I'm gonna It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. They have a lot of power. They have a lot of influence.
It's safe to assume that any dairy-related trend in the public consciousness is probably a DMI psyop.
What about that froyo trend in the early 2010s where there were way too many froyo shops and they all closed down?
I mean, probably.
What about that Jackass challenge where they all drank colored milk and threw up at each other?
Sure, why not?
What about that thing where the porn stars would put whipped cream on the dick and then they just kind of like, What about e-girls and cow print? Doja Cat's bitch, I'm a cow!
And dude, there's no fucking break from this shit. They're doing all the same like culture warring that we can't stop anywhere else. It doesn't make any more sense than all the rest of this cheese stuff does. Tom Gallagher, the former CEO of this thing, if you go to his Twitter, he's talking about like vegans saying that they're anti-animal, presumably because they're putting cows out of jobs. I mean, what does he mean when he goes to a conference and he says, what do all these strange bedfellows have to do with winning the anti-animal activist issues? What? What does that have to do with their agenda, which is get rid of farmers altogether? It's a genuine dairy propaganda outlet. He's talking like a cornered politician at a campaign rally. And every month, the DMI are just running it up on the dairy farmers bill. Every single year since their founding, they have broken IRS laws for how much you are allowed to compensate executives at nonprofits. They're going to the Willard in DC and they're telling the interns, no, don't buy any of that cheap stuff. Buy the champagne that's $45 a bottle. You have a female head of the dairy checkoff program with real legislative sway in the United States who is vacationing to Europe with, who's picking up the bill for dinner, who's obviously having an affair with the head of cheese marketing at a foreign cheese firm. You have a guy, Julian Torrey, who got compensated $900,000 for 8 months of work. That's a Me Too fire. That guy sexually assaulted someone. Allegedly. And yet, every single call to action on their website, every single article is be a patriot, buy American cheese. Being an American is so exhausting. Why is it that I'm always taking the blame for things? And why is it that every time I take the blame, the person telling me to seems to have a lot to gain from me taking personal responsibility for this issue? It's the exact same thing as British Petroleum inventing the term carbon footprint after they spilt all the oil in the ocean. I didn't do that. Why do I have to be worried? I didn't spill the oil. BP, I don't like you guys. I don't like you, and I don't like you, Tom Gallagher. I don't like you, DMI. Get out of my country! Get out! Get out of America! And all of this exists for what? It's $140 million a year is the budget of the DMI. And it's waste from top to bottom. They're generating environmental waste. They're generating wasted milk. They're generating wasted jobs by having people govern an entire information economy around cheese psyoping. It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter at all. It's so hard to defend this country, man. It is so hard. And I swear, man, I like some of the cheese stuff. I like stuffed crust pizza. I got cheese curds last week. A lot of my friends are cheese curds. I'm not anti-cheese. I'm just saying, is it worth it? Is it worth all of this? I don't think so. I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, maybe we don't have to do all of this. Maybe this isn't. Am I crazy? Am I the crazy one? Tom, I challenge you to the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. I'd like to see you stand there out in the cold with a wet t-shirt on, and there's ice in the bucket, and it's for a good cause. Stephen Hawking had it. And also, what the fuck was Stephen Hawking doing at Epstein Island?
Cut!
Why?
The government is creating jobs.
Why?
People need jobs.
Why?
Capitalism, baby. Under capitalism, the main marker of prosperity is whether the economy is growing, or, in other words, are the number of jobs growing. The economy is not this abstract thing. It's a collection of companies, and companies will only hire people if it's profitable to hire them. So, when the government is helping the economy, the government is actually making sure private companies are making money. In the case of the dairy industry, the lengths that the government goes to with the subsidies, with the cheese caves, and with the DMI are all done to keep it going. This pattern of investing incredible amounts of money and time into useless industries has reproduced itself across the greater economy, all in the name of the economy. Therefore, if the government wants to create more jobs, they have to, on average, either subsidize them, so companies make more money, or increase demand, so companies make more money. This is the logical purpose of the government. Keep capitalism going by making companies more money. These are the ways the economy has conspired to do this. There are two main forms of subsidies I want to talk about: direct and indirect. Direct subsidies are like what the government gives the cheese industry: direct cash payments. Every year, state governments give $365 billion to private businesses. The federal government gives more than $204 billion, $1.4 trillion if you include Obamacare and other private health care subsidies. That is $2 trillion every year, just to private companies. For context, that's about the same size as Italy's total GDP. You think that's bad enough, but there's also a shadow realm of subsidies, which we're calling indirect. They often find their way to corporations through bureaucratic rigmarole. Like when you start training at Walmart, they give you instructions on how to apply for food stamps. Food stamps, given to people by the government, encouraged by the place that should be paying people to afford food, become a way that the company can justify paying starvation wages. Walmart takes and grabs food samples as an indirect subsidy, and the government lets them, because that's what they are. And are these jobs necessary? Maybe. Probably. The government doesn't need to pay for them, though. Walmart's got the money. It's easy to be mad about that, but it's harder to be mad about something like infrastructure. We need that. But then infrastructure starts to include not just water pipes and building highways, but patrolling the waters, creating a smooth transfer of goods, defense spending, bombing Houthis, killing people in the Middle East that you have never met, all to shave 17 cents off a fucking chia pet. Those are all significant, but I want to focus on something that isn't talked about like a subsidy, the deficit. Now let's clear up a few misconceptions about it first. People talk about the deficit like it's a credit card, something that we need to really pay off or we're going to go bankrupt and our mom's going to yell at us. No. First of all, that debt is not just owed, it is owned. Primarily owned by companies, and it has to be paid back. Bonds and government securities and whatnot represent a guaranteed source of profit that the government pays out of thin air. Of the $34 trillion of public debt, $22 trillion is privately held, and $870 billion goes to the holders of that debt simply for holding it. Now, all of this doesn't even include how every 10 years or so, we like to give executives a little treat in the form of government bailouts. A quirky little example, we all remember, in 2008, the federal government gave $245 billion to a bunch of banks who made a little fucky-wucky and destroyed the economy, and now we're going to die for it. All this money is going out with the stated reason being the government is doing this to make things cheaper for consumers. If they subsidize the companies, the companies can afford to keep prices low. Isn't this a strange roundabout way of doing that? Like, why not subsidize the people buying the products? If the company was only taking the money and reinvesting it into the company, that would be something, but executives are absorbing the money. They profit massively every step of the way. We have a strange middleman system where the person who owns the company and owns all the labor of the workers just rakes in what the state is spending nominally to benefit the people. And if we don't bribe them, the people starve. We have to recognize what a weird state of affairs this is. Artificial consumption is stuff that the government buys that we don't need. Stuff that, without the government, no one would buy. Stuff like all the cheese in the cheese caves. It turns out the government buys an enormous amount of stuff, and none of it is cheap. One of the most egregious forms of consumption is the US military budget, which is now almost $800 billion a year. 20% of that is just spent buying new weapons, ammunition, and vehicles. $160 billion, which is about how much it would cost to end world hunger. Just building the 11 supercarriers the Navy currently has costs around $50 billion, which we paid to a private shipbuilding company, a company that without the US government acting as a consumer, simply wouldn't exist. This would save money, of course, but it would also save an immense amount of labor currently being used to support, genocide. And the government doesn't just buy all this stuff. Taking the supercarrier as an example, the government also pays people to pilot them, maintain them, clean them, cook the food that is served on them, grow that food, drill the oil that is used to power them. We have to fucking take care of this shit. The same way we have to take care of fucking cheese caves. Everything that the government buys, computers, parts, etc., is created and maintained and requires a complex chain of manufacturing logistics that is unprofitable and illogical, even from the hyper-lenient point of view of the market. The government is spending all of the money creating jobs, but jobs that don't need to exist. These jobs aren't useful to society. They are often, in fact, detrimental. An incredible amount of human time and effort on this earth is spent doing stuff that is fucking worthless. It is a distinctly miserable feeling. It is uniquely corrosive to the human spirit to do something you know is worthless. It's tantamount to literal torture. Remember Sisyphus? Of all the tortures the gods made him suffer, they didn't set him on fire, they didn't cut his balls off, they didn't gouge his eyes out. No, Instead, they made him do a boring, repetitive task that he knew was for nothing. Prometheus had his intestines ripped out by vultures at dawn every day, and he doesn't stick in our subconscious half as much. It's because Sisyphus is literally me. He's just like Shinji. He's literally me. Advertising is a little different from the previous two because it's mostly something companies do. Most of the time, the government is just tipping the scales. This is especially true for the DMI, which does a laughable job at convincing people to consume more dairy. But there are marketing campaigns that have successfully tricked people. For example, we basically got negged into having car-centric transportation. The street used to be a place that was shared among pedestrians, cyclists, horses, etc. However, because of how dangerous cars were, car manufacturers in the 1910s and 1920s sponsored anti-jaywalking campaigns. They made death machines and successfully convinced people not that we shouldn't use them, but that we just can't walk in the street anymore. This argument somehow made us think that the street was just going to be a car thing from now. The government's role here was not to force the issue, but after the fact legitimize cars as the American form of transportation. Rail funding was cut, cities were built around cars, and now everyone is forced to drive a metal box everywhere. The change was done by companies, but the government enforced their rule. This is a running theme in modern American life. Without even noticing it, we have been made wanting more than any other country. Corporations and their allies in government have successfully made America into a consumerist culture. Economists are wrong. Humans don't have infinite wants. We are finite people with finite desires, but we've been convinced that more stuff is the be-all and end-all of our living standards. The economy is not based around satisfying needs or even really wants. It's about implanting wants. Bullshit spectacle and sensation that you never thought about until it was right in front of you. It soothes our mental anguish, but it also makes us consume more than anyone on the planet. Every American consumes more fossil fuels than 2 Japanese people. We are 5% of the world's population and consume 25% of the world's energy. And for what? Are our lives 2 times as good as the average Japanese person? Not Shinji, he's literally me. In 1930, at the beginning of the Great Depression, John Maynard Keynes, a famous British economist, wrote Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. In it, he described a new phenomenon he called technological unemployment. Essentially, he predicted that increasing productivity will cause continued unemployment as workers are automated out of their jobs. He also said that in the next 100 to 200 years, so many jobs would be automated that labor would no longer be the human condition. Scarcity would end and wage labor would be a thing of the past. It is no accident he wrote this during the Great Depression. He observed that, yes, people were out of work, people were on the street, 25% of America's workforce was unemployed. But crucially, these people were not starving. People were out on the street, but the houses were still there, food was still around, there was enough stuff. The problem was not that there wasn't enough, but that there was too much. The Great Depression was a crisis of overproduction. Companies grew to a point that they started to make more stuff than people wanted. At first, companies juiced demand with credit, allowing people to buy more stuff than they could afford. But as they increased in size even more, production completely outstripped demand. When this happened, companies, on average, had to start selling their products less and less to cope. Before long, some had to start selling things for a loss. A company that is losing money has to cut costs or go bankrupt, and the fastest way to cut costs is to throw their workers onto the street. This creates a negative feedback loop as workers lost their jobs, had less money to buy things, which caused companies to have to sell their products for cheaper, etc. Only the strongest, most efficient companies survived. In Keynes' eyes, the crisis could only be solved by government intervention. The government primed the pump. In other words, created artificial demand. In order to escape the negative feedback loop, the government had to be the consumer. They had to induce demand. They had to give people jobs so they had money to buy things. In America, they even went so far as to pay farmers to burn their crops to reduce the supply. These policies worked all over the world. Governments paid unemployed people to work and bought private goods, and slowly but surely they carried themselves out of the Great Depression.
Okay? What's your point?
My point is that Keynes was right. Technological unemployment happened.
Dude, I still work a 40-hour week.
Yes, but look at the stats. Almost 100 years later, agricultural jobs declined from 40 to 10% of the workforce, and manufacturing jobs from 32 to 9. Both of those industries, essential to our living standards, are now negligible percentages of the US economy and highly efficient. The US produces twice as much food as necessary for its population and is the largest exporter of food in the world. Manufacturing in the US is the most productive per worker of any country in the world and has doubled in productivity since the 1970s. We have reduced all necessities to be a fraction of our economic output. It's the first time in history we've been able to do that. We fixed scarcity.
Then why are we still doing things?
Because the government made jobs. Remember that the government making jobs means that the government is doing something, anything, any of the things that we said above to make it profitable for a company to hire someone. You either do that by increasing revenues, through increasing consumption, or through direct subsidies, or by reducing labor costs, through something like food stamps. Through these methods, the government tried to solve the crisis of overproduction and fix the problem of technological unemployment. However, in doing so, it pumped trillions to private companies and doomed us all to working jobs that don't really need to exist. We have achieved an unprecedented amount of technological innovation, but we cannot afford to admit that, or the main metric of American prosperity, the economy, a collection of individual businesses, would collapse. Under capitalism, the solution is better than being unemployed, but it's left us in a rolling crisis that we cannot escape from. This state of affairs was tolerable from the 1940s to the 1960s, but neoliberalism put this crisis into overdrive. At least before, all the government funding in the economy came with workers' rights. Neoliberalism took the machinery that was saving capitalism from its worst excesses and gave that machinery to capitalism's worst excesses. So now, this vast organ of economic control was straight up controlled by big business. So of course, they just funneled even more money to themselves, in the process creating a Ponzi scheme in the form of the finance industry, the best and most clear example of an entire industry that just shouldn't exist. It's just gambling. No real human need is served by it. It doesn't even really have a connection to the real economy. Shit like the derivatives market has swelled to become 7 times larger than the entire world's GDP. It can't have any real connection because the real economy doesn't make any money anymore. Most manufacturing companies are just speculative assets that also happen to sell things. Airlines are a great example. They make all their money off credit cards and even then receive generous government subsidies. The only thing that makes money these days are finance, which does not generate any useful value, and education and healthcare, which just so happen to be the biggest beneficiaries of government subsidies. Summing it all up, there has been a permanent shift away from agriculture and manufacturing as those industries became more and more efficient. We simply didn't need that many jobs to produce the same amount of food and products, and companies just couldn't make the same amount of money off them. The government stepped in, made up for their profit margin, and in doing so allowed the free market to profit off a bunch of work that doesn't need to be done. We outgrew capitalism and refused to let it die. The natural consequence of a world of zombie companies and zombie industries is misery. Yes, capitalism successfully survived. Yes, people have jobs. But what good are jobs that don't serve a real purpose? What value is there in waking up every day to do something that does not matter, does not contribute? I love the way David Graeber put it in his book, Bullshit Jobs. Could there be anything more demoralizing than having to wake up in the morning 5 out of 7 days of one's adult life to perform a task that one scarcely believed did not need to be performed, that was simply a waste of time or resources, or that even made the world worse? Would this not be a terrible psychic wound running across our society? The rat race is more and more unpopular. More people grasp for financial independence. More people unionize, but the system continues. Because of course, companies benefit. They make money, hand over foot on the back of labor that does not need to be done. But we do it anyway. Then they lord it over us. They say, oh, Look at all the jobs we're creating. Worship us. Not only do we stuff these assholes full of money, they don't even have the humility to shut up about it. They're the most goddamn annoying people on earth. Entire industries are subsidized to make sure there's jobs. Obama said it best. Everybody who supports single-payer healthcare says, look at the money we would be saving from insurance and paperwork. That represents 1 million, 2 million, 3 million jobs. What isn't considered is why would we make people do things we know are wasteful? Now, trying to calculate what is or isn't wasteful is a Herculean task. From the standard of profitability, almost no jobs are wasteful. You have to create a standard of value that takes into account how things are used and then compares the output of every job against that, takes into account negative externalities, factors in the stuff that the government's consuming. For now, we're just going to call it like we see it. We know the waste is there. We can observe it with our own eyes. Finance is completely pointless. The US military is completely wasteful. Advertising doesn't make anything. There are 1,000,001 jobs that do not contribute to society at all, whether through making things people use or creating things people like to see. They are useless in the purest sense of the word. That's not all, though. In order to make the world worse, these jobs need IT workers to maintain them, janitors to clean up after them, and factory workers to make their equipment. The waste drags a tail of waste behind them, doubling the harm that it does. All that time wasted on jobs, lives that could be spent on things people actually want to do. Yes, things are trending worse and worse. Our system is dysfunctional and destructive, not only to itself, but to us. And that's where the hope comes in. This state of affairs cannot last forever. It's unsustainable. So instead of just waiting for it to end, we can take the technology we have and imagine a system that is fundamentally better than this one. Scarcity for basic goods and services is gone. We make more than enough. Why restrict access to them? Imagine a grocery store. You walk in, put your peanut butter and jelly in your grocery basket, and leave. That's it. No checkouts, no security cameras, guards. You can just grab and go. The food is stocked by local volunteers on a lazy Tuesday morning. The food is automatically inventoried by AI, and people volunteer their mornings to drive the food truck from the local distribution center. People volunteer not because they have to, but because it's easy and it feels good. What else do you do in a society without work? You go back to your apartment. It was designed to last 100 years by a team of architects and engineers volunteering 10 hours a week, doing what they love. It was built by a local team of construction workers and electricians that have nothing better to do than to put up houses. In your apartment, you sit and stare out the window, drinking your coffee. The mug was created in a lights-out factory, completely manufactured without human intervention. The chair you sit in was made much the same way. As you sit, you think about your students, how excited you are to teach them, knowing how much better it feels to live in a society that respects the effort you make for them. As you sit, you remember that you grew up in a warm bed, in a warm house. You grew up with a single mom who didn't have to give up her dreams to take care of you. You grew up knowing that no matter what, things would be all right. And you know that one day, your kids will grow up in a world that is kind. This is the world that is right in front of us. We are so close. And all we have to do is seize it.
We want to give a special thank you to Pete Harden at the Milkweed for consulting with us on this project. We admire his generosity and his longtime commitment to factual reporting on dairy issues. His archive online will go back to the early 2000s should you want to catch up on your dairy history. Whoa, what was Stephen Hawking doing at Epstein Island?